What's up everyone, welcome back. In this video we're going to be continuing from where we stopped. In the previous video we went ahead and established relationships between the existing tables or the existing entities that we have within our application, and those are the users as well as the books. Our logic was that a user could make a book submission and then we would keep track of the specific user who submitted that book, and that's what we did in the previous video. We also looked at how we could retrieve a user's book submissions and how we could return that relationship using the Pydantic models. So today we're going to be continuing by building a more complex relationship, and that is going to be one to link every user and every book to a review. So a user will be able to submit a book review and we shall keep track of the book they made the review on as well as the comments they made and all that stuff. But before we go there, I noticed that we have an error in our code. So if you go to how we create a user account, when you try to create a user account, this user is going to be created in our database, but it's going to return an internal server error, and this server error is being returned because this user has not been serialized in the way we want. So if we go back to our code that is going to create our user account, we have all the logic working except that for returning our newly created user. So if we go to our terminal and see what is wrong, we shall notice that we still get that missing greenlet error. So the missing greenlet error is one that is raised each time we try to operate outside the context of greenlet. So a greenlet is simply a simple unit of execution, just like you see a thread, but SQL Alchemy uses these to perform queries, and therefore if we operate outside the greenlet spawn context, then we are going to get such errors, and that's what it means when we get that error. So we're trying to serialize that, but remember this model is also getting the list of books, and that is going to make another extra query to our database to get all those books. So for us to fix that, we need to make sure that the where we are serializing this user for this case is going to be in a way that is not going to return those books, because we will be operating outside greenlet's context. So if you have not understood that, I'm going to of course leave some description or some explanation in the description so that you'll be able to understand what it does. So to fix that, what we're going to do is to simply modify our user model so that it doesn't return the books, or we shall create a separate model that's going to return all information about the user as well as the books that are associated with the user. So to begin, I'm going to create a class, and I'm going to call this class our user books model. So this is going to inherit from this class, because what we want to do is to go ahead and inherit everything that this class has, including all the attributes, methods, and so on. So to inherit all of them, we shall say that this is going to inherit from our user model. And once we've done that, we've created a class that has all these fields as well as the one to return the list of books that are associated with a user. So to use that, we are now going to leave our sign up route or sign up path to use the response model, which is our user model, and then that one that returns the user and their books, which is get current user. For that we shall use our user books model. So we're going to go at the top right here, and I'm going to start by importing our user book model or our user books. So let me make it more clear. Say user books, and when you go back here, we shall also rename this to user books. So once that is done, if we try to go back and let's say try to create a new user account, so I'm going to provide another user. Let's say this user is going to be Jennifer, and then we shall provide their email as, let's say, Jen123, and then let me actually also use Jen123 for the username, and then we can provide their name as Jennifer. So and then their, let's say, Jennifer Smith or whatever name we may have. So if we try to create a user account, in this case we shall see that their user account has been created successfully. And when you try to create a new token, so let me try to create a new token for them. So I'll just get the email and password, and then we shall go to where I'll create a token pair. So this is going to be at gmail.com, and then our password is, our user is going to be Jen123. If we try to send, in this case we shall get their access and refresh token. And when I get the access token, I'm going to try to get the current user. So I'm going to go to the authorization header, and then I replace the current token with this new token. So in this end, we can get the user, and for our case, we need to make this return the reviews and the box that this user has made. So we need to go ahead and set the response model so that it does that. So we have our user model. In our case, we shall say that this is going to be our user books model. So once that is done, it's going to return an empty list of books, just like you see right here. And now we're also going to work on our reviews so that we shall return the detail of the currently logged in user, their books, and all the reviews they've made on every book. Now that we've been able to look at how to fix that, let us look at our current database structure. So our current database structure simply has the users and our books table. But we want to go ahead and make sure that every user can add a review to a book. And therefore, we shall modify our database structure to look something like this. So in this database structure, we see that we have users having a one-to-many relationship to reviews. Therefore, one user can make as many reviews as they want, but they'll also be making reviews to a book, and therefore we have this association to the book table. So a book will also have as many reviews as possible. So one book will have many reviews and one user will also make many reviews. So we have a one-to-many relationship between books and reviews, and also a one-to-many relationship between our users and our reviews. So let's go ahead and implement this. The first thing we're going to do is to go within our code, and we're going to move our models to a common module, or to one module in which it will be accessed throughout our application. Now, for a simple app like this, if you do not want to get into circular imports in future, then it will be wise for us to have all our code logic for models settled in one place. And the reason as to why I'm going to do this is because we are going to have relationship attributes that will need for us to refer to other database models outside the modules in which we shall be creating them. So to do that, I'm going to first of all create the module. So I'll go right within our source folder, and within our DB, I'm going to create a new file which I'm going to call models.py. So all our models are going to be located in here. And once I'm done with that, then I'm going to start moving our models that are existing within our application. I'm going to start with our user model. I'll simply go ahead and provide it right there. And then I'll do the same thing for our auth. So I'm going to go ahead and simply delete this auth models file, since we've moved its code inside models.py. Another thing I'm going to do is to go ahead and do the same thing for our books. So I'll go to books.models, and then I'll simply cut the code from there, and then I'll paste it inside here. So once that is done, then the next thing I'm also going to do is to make sure that these inputs are at the top, and we're also going to look at how we shall fix our file so that we do not have them being repeated like the way we have them. One thing we can do is to just actually remove the repeated inputs, just like you see right here. And if you have any undefined, then we shall simply go ahead and fix them. So I'll come right here, and the first thing is to import date, because that is appearing as an undefined. So when you go to the bottom of the file, we still have the optional type, which we did not import. So I'll go at the top and also import it. So I'll say from typing import list, but we shall also import optional. And once that is done, we do not have any undefined. Now the next thing is to go ahead and fix everywhere we imported these within our code. So I'm going to use VS Code search feature, and I'm going to look for all models that exist within our code. So right in here, we have source.books.models, but we now know that all our models are being got from source.db.models. So I'll go ahead and fix that with from source.db.models import book, and I'll do the same thing for our .models. So I'll just come right here, and I'll just simply say source. This is going to be db.models. We shall import our user. And then I'll do the same thing here. I'll say source.db.models. We shall import our user. And then I'll do the same thing here. I'll say source.db.models. and that will go ahead and fix all the import errors that we have within our code. So I'm going to go ahead and save everywhere I made that change, and then we can now go ahead and test to see if our server is running. So I'll pull up my terminal right here. I'm seeing source.auth, so I think that is on models. So I guess I have to remove this or save. And now our server is running. What I'm going to do is to go ahead and remove the models that is inside our books. So I have to get rid of it just like I did for auth. And now we have our models residing inside our DB folder. So it seems like I still have another import issue. So right now we have these imports right here for basically the table relationships that we set up in the previous video. And how we're going to fix this is simple. Since we have all these tables or our models located inside one models folder, it can be as simple as just saying, instead of saying db.models or source.models or models.book, we can just say book. And then for our case, if we want to call a user model, since this is already defined within our current module, we can just say user. Then we can go at the top right here and remove where we imported our models. So in this case, I'll just simply go ahead and remove this, and that will just be enough for our server to run again. Now that our server has run, let us go ahead and create our reviews table. So to create our reviews table, we are simply going to go down here and we're going to create a class which we're going to call our reviews. So this reviews class is going to be similar to what we have at the top right there. So if you look at our database structure, we have this having the book ID or the book UID, which is going to be a foreign key to the ID of the users, as well as the foreign key to the ID of our books. So we're going to go ahead and set this up, but we also need the review text as well as the rating for that specific book that a user has submitted. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to simply define this based on what we have. I can go ahead and copy this entire class and then I'll paste it right here. Then instead of book, we shall have this being our review class, and it will have all these attributes, but the table name will be reviews instead of books. Another thing, we shall have the same UID. So we need to just go ahead and remove some of these other fields that are not going to exist on our table. And in this case, we shall have the first one being our rating. So the rating will be an integer, but we can go ahead and also keep this integer validated. So we can use the field function to do that and set up our max rating. Let's say our max rating is going to be 5, and therefore the topmost rating will be 5, or let's say 5 stars and stuff like that. Another thing we can do is to set up the user UID. So the user UID will be an optional UID, but that optional UID will be a foreign key to users.id, and I think that is correct. Another thing we shall set up is going to be the book UID. So our book UID is going to be set up in a similar way, but in this case it will have the name of our book UID, and then instead of being a foreign key to users.uid, in this case it will be a foreign key referencing book or books.uid. Another thing we've missed, I think, is going to be the review text. So we need to add that by saying review underscore text, and that will be a string. So this simply shows that this review text will be a string and it will not be nullable, and that is just enough for us. So we have now created our review table. All we are left with is simply modifying this method right here, which is simply want to return a string representation of any object that we create out of this class. So I'll just come right here and say that our review. So in this case, we can say that this is going to be a review, and this review is going to be for self dot. So in this case, we can just come and say self dot book, or in this case, we can just say book UID. And then we can also say by the user who created that, which is going to be self dot. So in this case, we can just say self review by book for book that, and then by user, and then we can have self dot user UID. And this will be just enough to do that. So I can go ahead and fix this and then say for book self.bookuid and then by self.userid. So our review database model has been created. So let's go ahead and use Alembic to set this up in our database. So to begin, I'm going to first pull up my terminal. I'll go to the bash, so I guess I'll have to create a new terminal right here. And then I'll run Alembic. For our case, we're going to create a new revision. And this new revision is going to have to be auto-generated from our model. So I'll say auto-generate. And for our case, we shall basically give it a message describing what change we have done. So our change is going to be add review table. So when you press enter, this will go ahead and generate the migration or the revision. So if we go ahead and check this out, we're going to notice that it's going to create the reviews table or the details about the reviews table and how we're going to apply them to our database. To make sure this reflects within our database, we're going to go within our code or within our terminal and run Alembic. So this is going to be Alembic upgrade head, and then these changes will be done in our database. So we've been able to set that up. Once our table has been created, we can confirm whether it has been created by simply going back to this graphical user interface right here. I'm going to just simply reconnect to the database. And now in our public right here, we can see public.reviews being added. So when you enter right here, we can see the different columns that we have set up on our database table. All right, now that that is out of the way, let us also set up our relationship attributes just like we did for our users and our books. So to begin, we are going to first of all set up the user relationship attribute that's going to allow us to access the user who created a certain review. So to begin, we're going to modify this by saying that this will be a user object. It's going to be an optional user object. So in case one does not exist, then that will not be returned. And the relationship will backpopulate to, so in this case, we have to modify this to make it reviews instead of books. And once that is done, then we are going to do the same thing on our user side by introducing the reviews list that is going to be the reviews that a user has made. So when you go back to our user model right here, we're going to do something that is very similar to what we have on our books list. So I'm going to go right here and I copy this relationship attribute. I'll paste it just below the books relationship attribute, but I'm going to rename this to reviews instead of books. And once that is done, the next thing is to also specify that this will be a list of reviews. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the book model and replace it with our review model. So keep in mind that we set this up. The backpopulate in this case is going to be our user. So that will be just exactly how we set it up. The user will be what this relationship attribute will backpopulate to. Once that is done, then let us go ahead and look at how we can set up the relationship attribute for accessing the book that review was left. So I'll just come right here and say book, and this book is going to be an optional book object. So once we have that, we can now come and basically do the same thing like we did here. I'll just come right here and say that our relationship is going to be pointing to reviews, and this reviews is going to be found on our book model. So I'm going to copy something very similar to what we have here, and then on our book model, I'll add that relationship attribute that is simply going to allow us to access the reviews that were left on a book. So in this case, we're going to come and specify that this is going to be a list of reviews, and this relationship will be backpopulating to the book. So this mapping will be onto our book, just like we set up this book relationship to map to our reviews on our book table, our book relationship. So once we are done with this, now it's time we created the API endpoint for basically adding a review to our books. To do that, I'm going to go within our reviews folder or our reviews package. So we don't have one yet, but I'm going to create one by saying new folder. So we shall call this our reviews folder. Inside that folder, we are going to go ahead and basically add a danda init.py to mark it as a package. And once we are done with that, we shall create both our models, actually not our models, but we shall create a service class that's going to allow us to basically create code that is going to be for the CRUD or for any functionality in our endpoints for reviews. So inside that, I'm also going to create the routes.py, and this is going to be where our code for the API endpoints or the API paths is going to be found. The first thing we're going to do is to create the review router. So we're going to create an object of the API class or the API router class, and to do that we shall first import it with from FastAPI. We shall import our API router. Once we've imported our API router, then we're going to create the review router. So this review router is going to have all routes that are basically related to reviews and all that stuff. So shall just create that right here. So we need to also go ahead and register this within our application. So I'll close some of the files that we have right here. And once that is done, we shall move to our init.py. Inside our source folder, we shall import that router by saying from, so this is going to be from source dot, in this case we shall have our reviews dot routes. We are going to go ahead and import our review router. And once that is done, then we are simply going to go ahead and include that router. Shall just come down here and say app.include router. So we're going to pretty much have almost everything that we have here, except that we shall rename it to our review router. So we're going to name this our review router. And once we are done with that, we shall have our prefix being API version and then /reviews. And then our tag is going to be the reviews tag. We shall look at this when we're looking at our API documentation with Swagger and Redoc in the later video. So once that is done, now let's go ahead and write the code for creating a new review. So to create a new review, we shall go within our service.py class. The first thing we shall do is to import our database model for our review. So we shall do that by saying from source.db.models, we shall import the review model. And once we've imported that, remember that all the functions or all methods for carrying out CRUD on both our users and our books is going to be found within their respective service classes. So we're also going to go ahead and import those. So we shall say from source.auth.service, we shall import the user service. And once that is imported, we shall also import the book service with source.books.service. We are going to import our book service. So this is going to be our book service. And once that has been done, now the next thing is going to be for us to create the service class for our review. To do that, we shall say that our class is going to be called the review service. And this review service is going to have our first method being that to basically create a new review. So we shall just simply call this add new review or add review to book, something like that. So this is going to take in the details of the user who has made the review, the details about the book that we are reviewing, as well as the session that's going to be used to make that specific query or make those queries to the database. So to begin, we're going to provide our user UID, which will be a string, or let's actually use the user email since we have the method for getting them their email. Then another thing we can do is to go ahead and provide the book UID, as that is the ID of the book we are going to try to basically make a review of. So in this case, we shall have our book UID, and then we shall also have our session. So the session is going to be an async session object. So we have to import the async session class. So I'll say from SQLModel.ext.asyncio, we shall import the async session class. So this is actually supposed to be found within the .session module. Shall go ahead and say import our async session. Once we've imported async session, now one thing that we also need is going to be the data that will be used to create that specific review, or the review text and the review ratings. So let's just add that right before the session. So to do that, I'll just simply come right here and say that our review data is going to be of type. So we need to basically set up the schema that's going to allow us to describe the data that will be for creating a review. Now, shall just simply call this the review create model. So we need to also go ahead and create this. So it doesn't really exist. So we need to go ahead and set it up. Now just come below right here and pass. Now, one thing you may realize is I forgot to name this as sync def, and that is a mistake that I do a lot. So I'm just simply going to come here and say pass, and then I'll format it a little bit to look more organized, but we need to create this schema. So I'll just come right here, copy this name, and then do something like from source.schemas, we shall import our review create model. So I'm going to go to our reviews, and then I create a new file, which is going to be our schemas.py, and this schemas.py is going to have that class that's going to be responsible for creating our reviews. So I'll just come right here and say from Pydantic, we shall import our base model class, and once we've imported it, we are now going to have a class that's going to be our review create model, but we're going to pass this for now. Before we create our review create model, we're also going to have our review model. Now this is going to be the model for basically helping us to get or retrieve wherever we shall be in position to retrieve and serialize a review object. So this is what we shall maybe use. So we're going to go ahead and get the model for our review, and then copy the fields that we have right here. So I'm just simply going to go ahead and get these fields and add them so that they can be part of the schema. So instead of having these other field details, I'm going to go ahead and remove them. And that is going to be just enough to set up our review model. So once this is done, now let me go ahead and set up the two fields that we shall need to create a review. Those fields are going to be our rating as well as our review text. So I'm just going to copy them and then paste them inside our class. So this is going to be what we shall have in here. Sorry for that. Once we are done with that, now let's go ahead and import that from here. So this is going to be our review create model, and this is going to be from .schemas since we are in the same file. So we shall say from .schemas we are going to import our review create model. Once that is done, now let's go ahead and write the logic for helping us to add a review to a book. Now it has been my mistake to go ahead and write a service class without using try catch statements, and that has been problematic, as you've been seeing. So I'm going to just begin by using a try catch. So I'll say try, and then I'll accept whatever exception we shall be getting. So I'll just write an exception right here, and I'll accept every error we shall getting for these service classes, and then I'll just raise an HTTP exception. I'll just go ahead and import that class from FastAPI. So I'll say from FastAPI.exceptions. In this case, we shall import the HTTP exception class. And once that has been imported, then we are going to go ahead and raise the HTTP exception, and that will be a server-side error. So I'll say status code. Status code for our case will be our status.http 500. So I have to also go ahead and import that. On FastAPI import status. All right, so let's go ahead and set the status up. So our status is going to be http 500 server error, and then our detail shall set a detail to just let the user know that something has been wrong. So shall say something like, oops, something went wrong. And that is going to be what we shall have. So what we're going to try to do is to basically go ahead and add a review to a book. So to begin, we shall first of all get that book for which a user wants to make a review. So to do that, we shall create a variable called book, and then since we have our user service and our book service, we shall make use of those to allow us to get the objects that we want to go ahead and add reviews for. So I'm going to come right here and create a book service object by saying book service, and our book service is going to be our book service. So just going to come and say book service, and then this will be the same thing for our user. So we shall say user service is going to be equal to our user service. And once that is done, now let's go ahead and try to use our book service to get the book. So we shall say await. We created a book service object. Then in this case, we shall call the getBook method. So the getBook method is the one that's going to allow us to get the book. We shall specify that our book UID. So in this case, we shall use the book UID. And that book UID is going to be the book UID we provided within our function or within our method right here. Then we shall also need the session. So our session object is the one that we're going to use for this case. Once that is done, now let's also get the user who is currently making that request. So to get the user, we shall just come right here and say that our user is going to be equal to await user service dot get user by email. We shall provide the email as the user email, and then we shall also try to get the session. So our session is going to be equal to the session. All right, so we've got both our user and our book. Now let's go ahead and create the new review that we want to go ahead and associate with these two objects. To create the new book, we shall just come right here and say new book, actually new review. This is going to be our new review. So our new review is going to be an instance of the review class. And once we've created that instance, now we're going to go ahead and unpack the data that we shall get from our review data. So to do that, we shall just come right here and say star star. So that is basically saying unpack as a dictionary, or unpack the dictionary as a list of keys and values. So in our case, we shall say that this is going to be our review data. Now remember, this review data is going to be in form of an object. So to unpack it as a dictionary, we shall call the model dump. This is going to be the model dump method. And this will go ahead, or to make it simpler, we can just come right here and create a new variable. So this variable can be something like review data and then dictionary. And this will be the value of that. Then we can unpack the review data dictionary. So once that is done, now let's go ahead and basically make sure that this review has both the user and the book associated with it. So to make sure that a user submitted a book, we shall just simply update the new review object by saying new review dot user. And for our case, this is going to be our user, the user that we've created right here. So once we've been able to do that, then let's do the same thing for our book. So we're going to associate this review to a book. We shall just come and say new book dot, and in this case, we can simply go ahead and say new book dot book or new review dot book. I don't know why I'm so caught up in books. So this will be new review dot book, and we shall associate it to the current book. Once that is done, now let's use our session to commit this to our database. We shall say session dot add, and then we shall add our new review instance. And once we've been able to do that, we shall await our session dot. So we shall call session dot commit, but since this is a coroutine, and therefore we have to call it with await. So I'll say await session dot commit, and for our case, we shall just simply return the new review. So we shall just come right here and say return new review. And just like that, we've been able to create the method that's going to be responsible for allowing us to add a new review to a book. We need to go ahead and create the route or the API path for adding a review to a book. That's what we have not yet done. So we need to go to routes.py inside our reviews folder. And the first thing I'll do is to make use of this review router object. So I'll say at review. So this is going to be at our review router. In this case, we shall say that this is going to be a post method. Then we shall be adding a review to a book. So this is going to be on review/books/ and we shall add the book UID. So I'll provide it here. Once I've been able to provide it, I'll simply go ahead and define the route handler for it. So I'll say async def, and this will be add review to book. Now let me close what we have here. So once I've been able to add a review to a book or define the function as add reviews to a book, I'll simply go ahead and provide the different things that we shall need. And for our case, it's going to be the book UID. So the book UID in our case is going to be a string. And then we shall also provide the user UID, or the user who is actually adding this review. Now to prevent doing this, we can actually access this user using the getCurrentUser dependency that we defined in the previous videos. So I can just come right here and say current user is going to be a dependency, but this is going to be of our user type, of our user class. So I can go ahead and import this by saying from source.db.models, we can have our user. And once we've imported our user, then we're simply going to come right here and say import our user. Once we've been able to create, or once we've been able to do that, once we have been able to do that, then the next thing we're going to provide is going to be the data that will be used to add this review. So shall just come right here and say that shall have our review data, and our review data is going to be of type review create model that we created within our schema file. So we're going to say from .schemas, we shall import the review create model. And once we've imported that, we're going to provide it right here. Then we shall also need our session object. Now remember, this session object was created inside source.db.main. So we have to also go ahead and import that. So we shall say from source.db.main. That's where we're going to import this session, which is called getSession, just to help us be able to access the session object. So our session object is going to be of type async session, and if we need it, we shall just come right here and say from SQLModel .ext.async session or async io.session, we shall import the async session class. Once we imported it, we shall provide the type, which is going to be async session, and then here we shall inject our dependency. So to inject our dependency, we're going to need to have access to the depends function. So this depends function is going to be the one that's going to help us get the dependency or get our session. So we shall say get session. Once we've been able to do this, now we're going to come right in here, and the first thing we're going to do is to create the new review. So we shall say new review is going to be equal to, so for our case, we need to import the review service. So we shall say from .service, we shall go ahead and import our review service. And once we've imported the review service, we shall create the object by calling it our review service. Once we've been able to do that, then we're going to make use of that object by saying review service. And in this case, we shall say review service dot add new review to book. And for our case, we shall need all these things. So remember that this is an awaitable. Therefore, we have to go ahead and use await to call it. Once that is done, we shall provide our user email. So we shall say our user email is going to be equal to the current user email. Now remember, this is going to be a type of object that we shall get from the dependency, which we forgot to do. So we have to also go ahead and import that. So that dependency exists within source.auth dot dependencies, and that's where we shall get the get current user dependency. So once we've got that, then we're simply going to go ahead and inject it by saying equals, and this will be depends, and then we shall provide our get current user. Now notice that we have an error here, and that is because this non-default argument follows a default argument, so you have to go ahead and fix it. Just go ahead and make it exist just before the ones that have current values. All right, so once we've been able to do that, let's go ahead and get the current user email. So we shall say this is going to be current user.email, and then we shall go ahead and provide the review data. So our review data is going to be equal to the review data, and then we shall also get the book UID. So our book UID, or the ID of the book we want to add the review to, is simply going to also be the book UID. Then in here, we're also going to provide the session object, and this session object is going to be the session object of our current path handler. So once that is done, now we shall just go ahead and simply return our new review. So we shall say return new review. One other thing that we can do is to go ahead and simply check within our service. So basically what we have here is a call to the get book function. So just in case this book does not exist, we need to be in position to return none or check if the book is not existing within our database. So to do that, what we can say inside our service here is to basically go ahead and create the book if the book actually exists. So what we're going to do is to just simply go ahead and make that check inside here. So new review.book is going to be equal to book, but this has to only happen when the book is not none. Once these checks pass, our user is going to be not none, and also our book will not be none, and therefore we shall just go ahead and assign them to the review object and go ahead and save. So that's just something that I remember to do. Once we've been able to do that, now let's go ahead and test this out in RESTFox. So right here in RESTFox, what I'm going to do is to first of all create a new folder, and inside this folder, I'm going to name it to reviews, and this is where all the requests for our reviews are going to be found. I've actually created the new request. So to fix that, I'll go ahead and create a folder which I'll call reviews, and inside here is where all these reviews are going to be found, or all API endpoints for reviews are going to be found. Now let us begin by testing that API endpoint for creating a new review or adding a review to a book. So I'm going to go ahead and simply get one of these, or get the root endpoint, and then that's what I'm going to be using. So I'm going to close some of the stuff I have here, and then I'll come right in here. So I'm going to provide our URL. So this is going to be /reviews. And then our path is going to be one for /book/UID. So I'll just come right here and I provide this path, which is going to be one for basically providing our book UID. So I'm going to get the book UID from where we list all our books. So I'm just going to come right here and try to get a new book. So it seems like I have a problem on our server. So we now see that we have a FastAPI error. So invalid ask for response field, check that the class reviews.schema.createModel is a valid Pydantic field type. If you're using a return type annotation, this is, so it seems like we made a mistake when defining the endpoint. So let's see what we have here. So this error arose from our schemas.py simply because we forgot to actually go ahead and mark this as a Pydantic base model. Now forgive me for this. What I'm going to do is to go ahead and fix this by saying that this is going to inherit from our base model class, and I think if we do that, then we'll have solved that issue. So if we go back to RESTFox, we see that our token is invalid, therefore we need to get a new token. I'll go to auth, and then I'll go to where I'll get a token pair. Try to log in with the currently logged in user, and I'll get a token. Now when I get this token, I'm simply going to go to where I'm making this review, or where I'm getting all books, and then I'll have to provide that specific book, or that specific token that is created from our login. Now this is going to return an empty list of books. So let me try to create a new book. So when I create a book, seems we're having the same issue. So I'll go ahead and simply provide a new token. And then we have a book right here. So if I get this book's ID, and then if I get this book's ID and let's say try to add a review to this book, so just going to go ahead and remove some of the things we have here. So here we are going to provide the book UID, and this is not found. Oh, this API, this is supposed to be on /API/version1 and then /reviews. So when I send, we are not authenticated, therefore I have to provide our authorization header. Come back right here and copy this newly created token. I'll provide it right inside where we are creating a review for a book. And then we see that our body is missing, so let's go ahead and provide it. I'll say body, this is going to be our JSON. And for our JSON, all we need to do is to provide the rating. So let's say the rating is going to be 3 out of 5. And then we are also going to have the review text. The review text, let's say the user is going to provide a review text, and this review text is going to be something like nice one or just a comment. We say that we're having this internal server error. So I'm going to go back this side and see where that is coming from. So this got multiple values for user email. Let's see where that is coming from. If we go back to our routes, we see that we have user email, which is this. And so let me try to see where this is. So if we go back to our class right here, we actually forget to provide self. So if we go ahead and provide self and save, if we try to go ahead and make this request once again, then we see that something has gone wrong. So that something has gone wrong where we are adding our books. So let's see what exactly is taking place. So basically what we are having here is internal server error. And one thing we can do to try to know what exact error may happen is by using the logging module. So I can just come right here and say import logging, and once I'm done with that, I can log the exception by using logging.exception. And this is just one way you can basically get to log an exception and also understand where it originated from. So if we go back right here and make the request, we shall see that something is wrong. But when you go to our terminal, we shall see what exactly went wrong. So what went wrong is data error, and here we have invalid input for query argument 1, which is that. So this is an invalid UUID. Therefore, we have to go ahead and provide a real UUID. So what I'm going to do is to go back where I got our books, and I will try to see if I've copied the entire UUID, which I didn't. If I copy this and try to add a review to the book, so let me make this a little bit smaller so that you guys can see. If I go ahead and provide this UUID right here and send, we now see that our review has been created successfully. Now let's go ahead and also make sure that each book is returned with its reviews. So the way we're going to do that is to modify the book schema. So we're going to head over to the schemas of books, and within our book schemas, we are going to make sure that each book is returned with all the reviews that are, or each book detail is returned with all the reviews that it contains. So we have this model or this class that we created for returning information about a book. But what if we wanted to return the detail of a book? So what I'm going to do is to create another class similar to what we did for the user class or user schema. So for our case, we shall have this being the book detail, or let's just say this is going to be our book detail model. And this book detail model will have something like, let's say it's going to be a base class of our book class, and then it will have a list of reviews that a book has. So for our case, this is going to be a list, so we shall import the typing class. So the typing class is going to be the list class, so shall say from typing import list. And once we've been able to do that, we're going to say that this is going to be a list of our book, of our reviews. So we have to go ahead and also import our reviews. So I'm going to come and say from source.reviews.schemas, we are going to go ahead and import our review. So we have the review model, we also have the review create model. If you go ahead and look at this, this is going to just simply return information about the review. So we're going to come and provide that. So we have this, and this is going to be a list of our review model. So let us try to get the book or the detail of the book. So for us to see this reflect, we have to modify the detail or the route that is responsible for returning a book. So when you go within our books, right here, we want to get that returns the book ID or the book with a certain UID. So we can just simply fix the response model to be that one that returns the book detail instead of returning just the book. So to do that, we shall just come right here and say from source.books.schemas or from .schemas, because we are in the same package, we can go ahead and also import the book detail schema or the book detail model. And once that is done, then I'll just come right here and specify that our response model is going to be our book detail model. So once that is done, I'm now going to go ahead and try to get the detail of the book so that we see our reviews. So when you go back to our books, we're going to try to get the book with this UUID, the one that we provided right here. If you go to get book by ID, so this book does not exist because I deleted most of the books that we had in our database. Now I'm going to get this token, the one that I have right here, and provide it where we get the book by UID. And once that is done, I'm going to try to get that book, which is not found. Now, since that book is not found, we're now going to provide a book that exists within our database. So to get our book, which is the book with this ID that we have right here, this time we expect that it's going to return all the reviews that are going to be present on that book, as well as the book ID and the book UID. So I hope this makes sense. We can also do the same thing for our users. So within our users, we can simply go to our users. So for our case, we can go back to our user schemas. So let's go ahead and try to do it. So I'll say reviews, and in our case, we shall have a list of reviews. So I'll try to do this. So I'm going to do this by, first of all, importing the schemas for our reviews. So I'm going to do that by going through the top right here, and I'm going to say from source dot, this is going to be our reviews dot schemas. We are going to go ahead and import the review schema, or what we call the review model. So right here, we shall just simply come and say review model. So this will be our list of reviews. If we try to get the currently logged in user, I'll copy our token right here. We shall now notice that this is going to return details for the currently logged in user. So we shall have both their books as well as their reviews. So this is like the detail of the user that's going to return all the information about how many reviews they have done on books, as well as how many books they have submitted. So this is just basically what we have done. In this video, we've basically built on top of the relationships we set up in the previous video. We've also looked at different ways to handle different errors that we may experience inside our relationships. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like to the video. Do not forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.